Bethany, I am super excited to get started here on this topic with you. Before we kick off, can you give our audience a little bit of information about Compass and about why you are really keen to speak on this topic today?
So my co-founder, Lisa Dussault, and I we're both engineers. We've both been in Silicon Valley for a really long time, and we've both been engineering managers for a long time. So when we were going to build a company together, we knew we wanted to solve something that mattered, something that was going to impact people's lives. And also we wanted something hard, and there's no harder problem in tech than people. There's no harder version of that than money. So we went right for the hardest problem we could possibly work on. And then we spent just the first chunk of time as we were doing it, and continuously throughout the last several years, we talked to hundreds of HR professionals, total rewards professionals. We don't want to be those engineers who say, oh, I know you think you know how to do your job, but I'm an engineer. So we learned everything we can, and we've learned so much over the last years from HR and total rewards. And I'm always excited to talk with both HR professionals who I learn from all the time, and then individuals and managers who haven't had the opportunity to sort of really dive into how it works. How do we make decisions on how we get paid? How does all of this really run under the covers? And that's why we're here. You're muted, Meg.
So sorry.
It's okay.
I'm trying to keep on mute because the dogs are snoring under my desk. So,
oh my gosh, no worries.
Thank you so much for that background. Like that's really helpful to kind of understand here. All right. So to jump into our topic here, when you're talking about compensation superpowers, do you feel that all workers have these same untapped superpowers, or are they unique to each person? And in that, if they're not necessarily inherent, is it something that people can work to develop?
Yeah, so I think that everybody in a business, we have a job to do, right? We have a role to play in every interaction. Everybody sort of has their thing that they're trying to accomplish to be individually and successful, and also as a group. I think that the compensation superpowers we tend to focus on at Compass are the ones that help the business be really great at making good decisions on how they pay people, how they can not make mistakes. Really, fundamentally, businesses are made of people, and people want to make good decisions. It's just really hard when it comes to compensation and how people are paid to make the good decision. We want to help them do that. But also digging into that question a little more, Meg, I think that as individuals, if we understand more about how companies actually work, how compensation is set, where there's wiggle room, where there kind of is, it helps reduce it's very empowering. It helps us make better strategic decisions for our careers. And it also honestly helps us understand when we might be getting jerked around versus when the system is just sort of set up in a really icky way. I'm definitely not someone who's going to come in and be, hella shiny all the time and just say, oh yeah, like this is why this is so great. And there's a lot of people working really hard in HR, total rewards, how compensation works, and then all throughout the business receiving their checks, like trying to advocate for themselves. There's this tug of war, right? Sometimes it's really not easy to tell what the right thing is to do. So I'm going to make an assumption here, please correct me if I'm wrong, Meg, that many of the people we're talking to here right now that I can't see are probably individual contributors or managers, maybe. So let's talk about,
that's accurate, yeah.
Let's talk about being people versus being companies. Okay. So as people, one of the best things that everyone has the opportunity to be better, no matter what your superpowers are. But let's talk about some hard facts that happen inside companies, especially for women, because that's, and people who are underrepresented generally. The first thing is that you really only get 3 chances to negotiate your compensation and your pay when you are really big ones. You get little ones along the way, but you get 3 big chances when you're in your life cycle with a company. The first one is when you're joining the company. That's your biggest one. That's the one where you get to have the biggest impact in your conversation. The second one is when you have a job change inside the company. You're getting a promotion, or you're moving to a different role inside the company. There's a little bit of wiggle room there, some negotiation that can happen. The last one, and by far the weakest one, is when you are leaving. When you are basically like, I'm out of here, I'm not getting what I need, and you're hoping they're going to come back with the counter offer. That's the weakest moment to try to do that. So when it comes time to thinking about things like, I'm a little rambling here, but when it comes time to think about the foundation things about these other points, when you have a little more time where you can say things, when you're negotiating for your pay coming into a company, which is the other part of the superpower you can work on, right? One, women do negotiate. We are just penalized for it. So yes, you should negotiate, but you should also understand that it's not a completely risk-free interaction. The second thing is there's this thing that people talk about a lot. I love when that people are getting educated about the market, what the market pays. But I have some news for you, which is the market is kind of not just a thing. The market is if you have a company that pays near the high point of the market, and you have another company down the street that pays near the middle of the market, the other company is not by definition a bad business necessarily, and they're not by definition not satisfying pay equity by not paying what the guys pay down the street. So if you go into a company and you want to go into a role and you're like, I would love to come work here, and they make you an offer and it's really low, and you've asked them, is this really what the range is, and you've tried, they're not, you can walk away, which is the other thing I think that is that's a compensation superpower, is understanding that sometimes their hands are tied and you have to have the ability to walk away sometimes. Those are really the big superpowers, right? Knowing your worth, understanding there's some room in that worth, being prepared to walk away if your negotiations don't go quite the way you need them to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously within those superpowers, there's, some places there's a lot of wiggle room, and for some people who are maybe not as resourced or don't have the luxury of walking away, right, it can be really helpful to know that like you don't only have the one tool in your arsenal, you can kind of take a look at some of these others and be able to know, well, this is what I'm supposed to be being paid, and we both agree that my work is worth this and my presence and my contributions are worth this. So if you can't pay this right away, can we negotiate for a review at 90 days, or can we revisit this in 6 months or something?
So classic case where somebody ends up in a situation where they aren't able to get the same amount of compensation that might be appropriate for them. This happens especially to underrepresented people all the time. Oh, dear Lord, I feel like I'm spilling lots of tea. Okay, here it is.
Please,
a bunch of us have been through this, right? You go into a situation, you're negotiating for a job. The job was for a, let's say, senior level role. And then you go through the interviews, you like everybody, everything's going great. kind of what the senior level role is going to pay. And then they come back and say, we're just not sure you're going to be senior level role. We think we'd like to offer you this more junior level role. Equivalent case of this for a manager is if you come in and you're going for a director role, and they're like, well, how about you just manage this one team? Happens that they want to have this conversation with you. That's a moment where you have to make a decision. Like you just said, Meg, one thing you could do is you can say, I can come in and I can show you how well I can do in this role. And in 6 months, we're going to talk about me doing something else. But here's a couple things you need to do. 1, get it in writing. 2, don't just get it from your direct manager. That person might change jobs. People change jobs all the time. You want to get it from the company itself. 3, a review is not a guarantee of change. 4, you still need to be prepared to walk away if you feel like you're not getting what you need. Pay equity, by definition, is about how people are paid inside a company compared to other people inside a company. It's not really about, are you being paid? And it's about your contributions inside the company too, right? So if you're doing senior manager work and you're being given a junior manager title and junior manager pay, advocating for yourself to get that promotion, to be recognized for that, that's a compensation superpower. But saying, oh, I can make more money at the company down the street for the same job, that's not necessarily a pay equity issue. And I think that's something that we can get confused about.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, these are all tips and advice that I really wish I'd had. I think it was 2 jobs ago, maybe 3, where I was in the same position. I got told, yes, we'll evaluate it 90 days, only to find out that person was not as good as their word. And I had no recourse and nothing else to do about it. And one thing I think is important to point out is when you're talking about walking away, especially when it's like a downgrade, you can also hold the company's feet to the fire a little bit and say, okay, well, if you're only going to pay me at this rate, or you want me to start at this level and maybe see if I can work up. Sorry, guys, the dogs. Maybe let's talk about what's the actual difference between the responsibilities. What is it need for me to take this lower rate? Because if they can't draw the line on like, here's what we would expect of you at director level, but here's what you'd have to do at manager, they might be paying you $1 and getting $2 worth of work out of you without you ever knowing.
Constantly,
Yeah.
constantly. How many of us have been in the situation where we leave a company, I want to say it, and they hire 3 people to replace us? Right?
At least
like
twice
how many of
happened
it?
to me.
Right, exactly. Like I think that this is why you're actually strongest when you're coming into the role too, right? Because that's when you're advocating for what you think is going to be set. You can say, by the way, you'd have to hire 3 people to replace me, but there's a lot of things that can happen inside a company that are outside the view of almost everybody inside the organization that can affect your ability to get that upgraded pay. So for example, by the way, I don't think any of these are necessarily good. I'm just saying there are factors at play. One thing that can happen is finance can put a cap on and say, we shall have no raises over 10% ever. Now that is, in my opinion, often bad, because what happens is, what you're saying there is, so if I'm going to need to hire somebody else, this person has had tremendous growth, we under leveled them. That's what you'd say if you hire somebody too low. So you'd say, we under leveled this person on the way in, I want to pay them commensurate with the work that they're doing. And this is if you're a manager, you're trying to advocate for your team. Sometimes you can end up with financiers coming back and saying, no, we're not going to give them that raise because that would be a 17% raise, and I don't want to set a precedent that they should be expecting that. I have been 2 of the 3 people in that conversation. I've never been finance saying no, but I've been the manager fighting over it, and I've been the person getting no said to me. And I think that, having your manager be somebody who can advocate for you really well, or you need to advocate for your team if you are a manager, is important. But understanding what those constraints are when you're going in can help you set that context, which is why my one hot tip for managers and for employees, depending on which side of the sentence you get, if a manager tells you they're going to get you a raise or a promotion and you don't actually have it in your hand yet, then know that they're going to do their best maybe, but it doesn't mean they can deliver it. If you are a manager, don't tell people you're going to get them stuff before you have it. It's not fair. Mistakes have been made. Don't make that one. And being able to really deliver on your promises, I think, is another superpower on it.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to do when you want to make people happy.
Well, especially if you think it's going to be a sure thing and then it's not. Until you what is it? A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Until you have it.
Yeah, we're getting some great questions on negotiation coming up in the thread, and it sort of dovetails nicely with this question that I wanted to ask you. So we heard a lot of stats, especially post 2020, about how 5 million American women lost their jobs due to the pandemic. That obviously it's it's an estimate, it's a figure based on certain.
But it's mostly women of color too. That's the other thing. Almost entirely women of color. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as a result, there are a lot of people who are either desperate to find employment or they are very aware of how lucky they are to still have a job.
Mm-hmm.
How can people, especially women, especially BIPOC, especially people that are from these not underrepresented communities, how can they successfully advocate for their value at their current job or future jobs when that employment climate really seems like it's putting employers at the greatest advantage?
I hear you. There is another stat though that just came out this, I think it was this week, I saw it in HR.com, which I think is going to cause a little bit of a swing here. And that's why I want to mention it. According to Pay Scale, they had done the survey. Sorry, I can't remember who it was. 1 in 4 people is planning on leaving their job as soon as this is all over.
I did see that. Yeah. Which made me really, that's how much, if this question was valid, but I was like, yeah, let's get Bethany's take on it.
I saw that and my jaw just dropped on the floor. And yet I totally buy it. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
there's a bunch of reasons
why for people, what's really important to them, or even not even just highlighted. It's changed drastically what is important to people and what where their value lies. There was a question.
And how companies have treated you during the last year, right? Because then you're you're going to
really value you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or do they know how to? Even if they try to, are they just bad at it? Do you stay with somebody because they're bad?
Trying and they
could be trying. And there's lots of great companies too out there that are doing great work on this and doing wonderful jobs supporting people. But companies are made of people. There's a lot of variety of people, right?
Yeah. So let's say if your priorities or maybe what you really value or what's of most importance to you has changed since you're hiring, right? This person gave the example of they negotiated for additional time off or flexibility that they needed at the point of they were hired instead of a higher salary. Is there a way to catch back up at that salary point?
So the best thing that you can do is, okay, here's a couple of things I would do generally. These are just general things. One, practice on a friend before you have a conversation with somebody at work. That's always great. Just get somebody you can just talk it through with. And they don't need to play like, they don't need to be like mean during the conversation. They just need to be there and like help you talk things out so you can practice a little bit. That's my first thing. The second thing is, depending on where you are geographically, the laws and norms around the amount of data transparency available to individuals inside the company can vary. This is especially true for candidates in California, though not employees in California. I know we got people from all over on this, so I'm not going to do too California focused. But one example would be that in the state of California, if you're applying for a role, you can ask, how much does this job make? Now, once you are in, you don't have that right anymore, which is silly. Hopefully they fix that. But what that has led to is companies starting to get ahead of this, be a little more transparent. You don't want your new hires to know everything and your existing employees to find out from them that something is off. So they're being a lot more thoughtful about that. So for asking about information about how much, what's the salary range for my job right now? Where am I inside my salary range? Right? And for this person who specifically did this negotiation, being able to quantify the value of the additional paid PTO, being able to come back and say, I really valued that flexibility. I understand that it's out of compliance with the norms of the company. I would like to create an exchange where I sort of go back to the company norms, which is easier for you to manage and track. Then in exchange, normalize my compensation to have that. By the way, what is the range for this role right now? I know every company is different. You don't just say the market. Don't say the market. Just say, what's the company's range for this role? Because if you find out that you're near the top of the band already, that's good data. You need to know that, because the next conversation you have is, well, let's talk about how I'm going to move into my next level, right? Pay transparency fundamentally means that every person inside the company understands why you make what you make and how you can make more. That's all it really means. It doesn't mean everything's posted on the blog or whatever. It means you understand. And that means if you go towards that, then you're asking questions around that. Or if you're a manager, you're supporting people who ask those kinds of questions. It's just making your company culture healthier, stronger. Left in absence of answering those questions, people write their own stories, and the stories we write for ourselves are never good. Even if everything's fine, we'll assume things are bad.
Yeah, well, and asking these questions can also give you a lot of insight and a lot of knowledge, because how the company answers these questions is very telling. I've been places where they'll answer with some version of, well, I can't release that information. I can't share that information. It's not fair to other employees. It's like, no. You're not telling me who gets paid what.
I'm not asking for their stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So we are having a ton of people asking about negotiation specifics, and I know we won't have time to get to all these great questions on today's chat. So I do just want to flag, I put some information in the chat, and I know Paloma especially is sharing other links here to a search you can do of our platform for our previous chats that deal on negotiation. I can personally attest that the ones with Donna Hughes are amazing. So definitely check those out. All right, so let's talk about this. You talked a little bit about market and what you could earn depending on the market, right? So with the ongoing shift that many businesses are looking at towards either remote, for long-term, or remote friendly, flex roles, that kind of thing, what should people who are used to an in-person employment situation know about remote compensation?
Oh, this is a great question. And I think it comes down to the negotiation question too. When you're thinking about if you're going to go join a company, these are questions you can ask whether you've been in a company for a long time or you're thinking about joining. If you want to work remote, being really clear about that is something that's important for you. You want to make sure that you ask directed questions about it and that you're clear about the expected in-office presence. I think that when all of this is sort of said and done, you're going to end up with a lot of companies that operate on a concept that's being sort of branded as hybrid, where you have some people who live in the office most of the time. You have some people who live in the office rarely. They come to the office on occasion. And even the people who are in the office most of the time have several days when they're not in the office. Maybe they'll be in the office 2 days a week, and that's the in the office crew. There are three basic ways that companies pay people when they're distributed and all over. The first one is the pay everybody the same amount no matter where they are. Has some pros and cons. The second one is sort of break the country or the amount of places where you have people into chunks. So Buffer does it this way last time I checked. And so you say, okay, we've got 4 groups. We've got sort of 100%, 90%, 80%. And you say, if you're in this city, then you're in this thing. It's very, very programmatic. And then the last one is that you'll do the very detailed, like, in this town, we looked it up, this is how much it pays. These are the 3 ways they do it. Asking your company if they know which way they're going to do it is a completely valid thing to do. Asking them to explain what their model is going to be for people who've been with the company for a long time is also really important. One of the best things the company can do is be consistent, but if you've been with the company a long time and now you want to move to somewhere else that is either more or less expensive, how is the company going to deal with that? Sometimes the company doesn't know, right? They haven't decided. There's still a lot of that going on. Sometimes what happens is they're just going on a case-by-case basis, but in the best cases, the company is going to be consistent and they're going to do things like, say, like, honestly, Facebook, I think, did this really well, where they came out and said, we're going to do pay in the region where you live, but you've got a year to figure it out, right? So they aren't just dropping it on you with no notice. I think that having lots of notice is one of the best things that a company can do. You should expect that a lot of companies are going to continue to pay some version of local rates. Now, local rates go off the market. Remember that? Local rates are going to, yes, they're going to shift over time. As roles move, as people move, as demographics move. Right now, it's already kind of different. Like, lawyers make more in some cities than they do compared to, say, engineers, than in other cities. They make a different amount, right? It's just depending on what the industry competitiveness is for that talent in that market. But we will see changes in, say, is Peoria always going to be 65% of San Francisco? No, it probably isn't, but it's not probably going to be 100% either, right? It's just going to take time as things shift out. And I think that urban centers are going to stay higher. People who are more rural are going to end up still having a change. It's just going to be a matter of how much. And different roles have different power to negotiate on this. And that is the other thing that is a historical thing that comes with the idea of the market, which is that some jobs there's just more, people say it's the value you bring. No, it's about market dynamics and the availability of somebody to fill that role versus the need for someone in that role, which isn't the same as value provided, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. We're getting a lot of people that are asking very, like, kind of pointed questions about, like, what does it mean when they say blah, blah, blah. Again, we won't be able to get into each one.
But pick one if you want to, and I can take one, but I won't be able to do a bunch of them, I'm sure.
We're actually super running out of time. So the one thing I will say, it's okay. And I hope we can have you back for another chat. I would love to host you. Because there's some really great questions in here, but it's also really important to know, like, you can ask these questions of the hiring managers. You can absolutely ask them, because just because a certain term might be able to look this up and it means blah, 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 doesn't mean that that's how that company uses it. So you can even be keen on that. Like, hey, I'm really curious about what you mean when you say this, because my impression is blah, blah, blah. Or you can even just say, I'm really curious what you mean, because I know different companies use this differently. Can you explain this? Right.
And the title embroidery I would put on that, before we have to run away briefly. Okay, the tiny embroidery I would put on that is this. I will say this one, which I'm sure somebody has asked. When somebody says, we pay 75% of market, I'm sure somebody has asked this question, right? One, that doesn't mean they pay 75%. What that means is that they looked up in a database, and the database says that it's between this amount, and they're at the 75%. That's the first thing it means. The second thing is, that doesn't mean they pay 75% for every role. They may pay 75% for some roles and 50% for other roles. That's really normal too. It depends on what they're trying to fight, what they have to fight the most to get, right? The last thing I would say is, they'll start saying we pay 50% or 75% of market, but then they're running that past why they lost people through recruiting. They're looking at the other people they're competing against. They're looking at other sorts of things. And then they're coming in and saying, so these are our ranges, which we based off of 75% of market. So that's what that one means. It's a really common one.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So last question before we go.
Yes, ma'am.
So one of the things that I was researching was pay equity, especially gender equity in the workplace, right? And according to the Institute of Women's Policy Research, American women will not see equity until 2058 if things progress as they are currently. Now, I know Compass helps to encourage companies towards pay equity for all their workers, but what can employees do to hasten this crucial aspect of gender equality?
I'd be careful here. I'll tell you a secret without telling you directly what to do. It is illegal for companies to tell you not to share your pay with your coworkers.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Having come from a legal background, I know this to be true, and I can't tell you how many times I've told it. It has been true for a long
time. It's been true for 50 years, like a really long time, right? It isn't like a recent thing. It is
and they'll all say, we'd rather you don't share. Doesn't matter. It's your information. Do with what you want. Don't bully other people into telling you theirs, but like you can tell other people all you want.
And the big thing to help with gender equality is, honestly, men, especially white men or people who are heavily represented in an organization, sharing what they make, because they're in the position where they can come in and say, well, what do you mean? I'm making $175,000 a year. And everyone else is like, excuse me? So the people who are in the empowered positions are the ones who have the best opportunity to help make this shift in a lot of ways. And so I know that's
no, it's good. They got to pull that Benedict Cumberbatch, they got to say like, hey, because that's the thing I feel like a lot of people don't get, right? If you are making this and somebody else who's like your, a counterpart is making this person should not be mad at you. This person should be mad at the company because the company's the one that's underpaying them. You're not taking their piece of the pie. So
yes, correct.
And I think that's an important thing to remember when you have these conversations is to, especially if you know that you're like above what this other person's being paid, make it clear that like, hey, I think you should also be at this rate. I'm not better than you because this is what I'm being paid. I might not even be a better negotiator than you. Like
it's just how it worked out.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is it's a unifying thing that every manager runs into, that when you first start working with a team, at some point you look at it and you go, oh my God, why is this person making so much different than this other person? As a manager, even if you're a line manager, you have the power to begin to advocate to help fix those inequalities as well. And that is incredibly important. And it helps make your team stronger, healthier, better. Those things matter.
Yes. Okay. I'm so sorry. We have run long.
Okay. But, sorry.
Thank you so much for this. This was wonderful. I hope everybody else, it looks like the chat is blowing up. So hopefully a lot of other people got great information out of this. Thank you so much for joining us.
I would love to do it again.
Yes, I'm going to bring you back. I've decided.
Great. Awesome.
So yeah. Do you want to share any links or anything for people to check out Compass, or you want to drop those in the chat and send them along?
Yeah, Compass is really great for businesses. So if you're an individual, not so great, but otherwise it's right up here on the screen, www.compa.as. You can also drop me a line on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much.